Hello and welcome to episode number 193 of the Board Game Barrage podcast, a podcast all about board games, the latest hotness, and how to have fun with your friends, even when they are losing. I am joined by Neelan and Mark, my two friends who lose most to me. Hello, Mark and Neelan.
Hello. Is that a request for me to...
No objections.
I didn't know if that was a request for me to pull up the stats.
No, I would say that the no objections sort of says it all.
It supersedes the... Yeah, got it.
Then again, this is probably the 12th time I've used the joke, so maybe they can just go back to a previous time where you've objected. Today on the Board Game Barrage podcast, we are going to be telling you about some of the games that we have been playing that Neelan brought us back from Gen Con 2021 in Indianapolis. And after we do that, we are going to talk to you about the unbearable unlightness of board game boxes.
That's a reference to, what's the writer's name? Kundera?
I want to say Hemingway?
No, you're wrong.
Is that right?
No, it's like Kundera, I think.
I'm an author, so it's...
Yeah, it could have been Kellen, either one.
What am I thinking of?
Or in other words, the tanks have finally discovered that board games take up space in our domiciles, in our homes, or in other words, random anecdotes about owning board games and what that means for you. But let us start with what is hot, with what is fresh. I am so excited for Neelan to talk to us about Riftforce. Then I will take us through Kabuto Sumo, a very anticipated Board Game Barrage game, and Mark will end us.
Yeah,
well,
I'm killing you at the end of this episode.
Will finish us.
Yeah, also that. Another way to think about it.
Finish us off with Whirling Witchcraft from AEG. Neelan.
Yeah, so we didn't end up talking that much about my Gen Con trip on the last episode. But yeah, these are all games that were like
Drag it coming.
Yes, these are all games that were hot at Gen Con, and I was happy to mule to us to like play together. So Riftforce is one of a handful of games that I was excited going into the show. I kind of knew that Capstone is always a publisher who I'm at least a little bit interested in whatever they're doing next. And when you tell me that Capstone is making a 2-player dueling card game, it feels so outside of their wheelhouse that I'm definitely more interested in that, because it's kind of like, what's the Capstone version of this look like? And in all honesty, it's not very Capstone-y, but in some ways that made it all the more surprising to me. Capstone were kind enough to give this to us as a review copy. What Riftforce is a almost battle line style game where you have 5 lanes. You have 5 cards laid out in the middle representing the 5 lanes, and each player has a deck made up of 4 different colors of cards. You could randomize the colors, or you could draft those colors, but these colors represent different factions, different elements like frost, fire, air, or what have you, and those will determine the power that all of the cards have in your hand, the special ability that they have. Otherwise, they are just numbered cards, 5, 6, and 7 of each of those colors. That makes up your whole deck. What you're doing in Riftforce is playing these cards out to lanes, trying to defeat the enemy's elementals, which are the creature cards, in order to get points. Anytime you kill a creature, you get a point. There's an action you can take that if you have any of these lanes uncontested, you will get a point, and the first person to 12 points wins. I think the easiest way to go into what Riftforce is all about is just to very quickly sum up what all the actions are, because they're really simple. First action you can take, and you're going to get one of these a turn, is to play up to 3 cards, 2 lanes. Cards of the same color or of the same number, and you can just stack them all in one lane or play them to adjacent lanes, 1 each. That is one of the actions you can take. The second action you can take is to activate cards that are already on your lanes. You discard a card from your hand, and you either activate up to 3 cards of that number or of that color. And activating is how you trigger those special abilities I talked about. So all of the fire elementals you have all of the same special ability, like deal 2 damage to the creature opposite, but then they also inflict collateral damage on one of your creatures. There are creatures that will deal 1 damage to the lane opposite them and both the adjacent lanes, or move between lanes, dealing different amounts of damage. So there are fun ways to combo these elementals off of each other. So, for example, I might activate all of my 5s, and if I have a 5 green card, I can pull a card towards my lane, and then using another 5 card in that lane, I do more damage to it. So it's finding the way to utilize combinations of cards in your lanes every time you activate groups of them. And finally, the last action you can take is just to do the check, which is to say, am I uncontested in any of these lanes? If so, get a point and then draw back up to 7 cards, because otherwise you do not draw cards unless you take this action. Those are all the rules, basically, for Riftforce. It is a game where the details are in the interesting ways that you can utilize cards, which cards you hold back in your hand, because it's all very well playing cards out to your lanes, but if you can't activate them by holding some back, then you're not going to be able to utilize them. Cards typically don't do much just by being played to a lane. You have to be able to activate them on a later turn. There is some nuance and some interesting variance in the way the different factions work. So there is something to be said for just different factions comboing together in interesting ways, which makes the draft a sort of an interesting mechanic up front. I thought this was very surprising for a game that I didn't know what to go into expecting, and expecting something a little bit more magic and a little more CCG. I came away with something that feels a little bit closer to almost like a MOBA-esque type feel. That's not really right, but like this idea that lane adjacency matters and moving things and protecting lanes and sort of having positional awareness of where creatures are relative to other creatures, I thought was surprising. It reminded me a little bit more even of Artifact, which is Valve's CCG game, where, you know, you have this idea that every lane is important and how you distribute your combinations of elements between the lanes is vital. You guys have both played Riftforce. What do you think of it?
I enjoyed my play of it. I played it once against Kellen. Kellen remarked at the end about how terrible I was at the game, which I understand. I think because
that's a very specific context. Why are you telling them that?
Well,
without all this, there's the table setting. There's the table set. We were hugging, and we said,
right.
I said, you weren't that good at the game, but it's okay. And Nealon was trying to defend
I think what
the game
was
because of your poor play.
You mouthed to Nealon, I don't think he played very well. So it was a little bit
in full view of Mark. And
that's
very
right. Yes,
audible.
exactly. Another thing you said after you slandered me, you asked me what games this reminded me of. And I think one clear comparison are CCGs. And I think that you guys have more experience with CCGs. And I think one thing that benefits plays of the game is multiple plays. I think once you sort of understand the powers of the different suits of cards, then you're in an advantageous position because you know which ones combo off each other. But when it comes to what the game is like, CCG is obviously one way of thinking about it. Something I mentioned yesterday, which you guys apparently had talked about, and I think Capstone had mentioned, is it does have a battle line sort of feel, where you're fighting over areas akin to the battle line flags. And then your mention right now, Nealon, about it being like mobile-like. Again, not a type of game that I have too much experience of, but the idea of lanes and fighting over lanes is, I think, an apt comparison.
I think that it's actually striking a very delicate balance between more just like hand management card games like Parade, Balloon Cup, and Battle Line, obviously, and something with a little bit more wild, like CCG blood in its veins. And I think it does quite a good job. It also has some low-key, Cloudus, small box games vibe to the action selection. You only get to do one thing on your turn, and taking a turn just to get cards back kills your tempo, man. And it really is this back and forth where no matter what, your guys are dying. It's not some position where someone gets into a strong position and then they maintain it for the whole game. It's like yo-yoing back and forth quite dramatically. I think that the highest praise that I can give to Riftforce is that I have actually enjoyed it more every time I have played it. I've now played it 3 times, and literally my enjoyment of it has increased every time. Perhaps that's because, again, on my 3rd play, I crushed Mark. That could be helping. But there's a lot of subtle things that you have to sort of think about, even though you can get screwed by the cards that you draw. So it's like if you have a hand that has 3 or 4 of one type of card in it, the fire cards, and you put those all out and you're like, man, I'm about to wail on him with all my firepower. When you redraw cards, having played 4 fire cards, you may not get any.
Yeah.
With 4 suits of cards and not that many cards of each color, you may not get to activate those cards. And so there is that balance between play and activate that can really bite you. I think the powers do not go off the rails in any way. They're all pretty small. So if you are that person who likes just traditional two-player light little card games, you may find this is a good way to have a little bit more straight fighty in your card game. And this was great, and I look forward to playing it more.
Yeah, one thing I do also want to say before we close out is I think Capstone has priced this exactly right. It's a $20 game, which is, it's almost not impossible for me not to recommend at that price if what we're talking about sounds appealing. If you have room in your life for a two-player card game that has this sort of almost CCG feel, but just being in a self-contained box, this is a definite purchase for you.
And if we can get Nealon to stop bringing up Eternal for 6 months, maybe, thank you, Capstone, for doing this for us.
What's the difference between CCG and LCG and another CG? Isn't there another CG?
It's more about the distribution model than anything else.
Right. So CCG is like Magic the Gathering, right?
Yeah, you're buying booster packs. The cards are random. LCG, anytime you buy a box, it's a fixed pack of cards. You know exactly what you're getting.
So would Riftforce count as an LCG?
Not really, because it doesn't have the model at all, really, because it's just a closed box game.
Right.
But they will expand.
Yeah,
or
but even
like
then, if they bring out an expansion for it, I still don't know that. I guess that would get it closer to like LCG.
The term living card game isn't
really, yeah, it's kind of
not
meaningless.
real. Yeah.
I feel like living card game, if anything, is just a commitment to saying we will be bringing out a lot of expansions for this.
Got it. I got you. And they won't be randomized. They'll
Exactly.
be complete
Yeah.
sets. Interesting.
But sometimes you have to buy more than one base set to even play with the full player count because it's alive.
That is Riftforce by designer Carlo Bortolini and Capstone Games.
One of the games that I was very excited to try with everyone is a new dexterity game, Kabuto Sumo. This has art from Kwanchai Moria, Kwanchai Moria.
Moria, I think.
Kwanchai Moria, and it is a dexterity game that uses the mechanic from the arcade where you put the money in and you're trying to push other money off the big plate, and if a stack falls off, you get all of that money or you get all of those tickets. So if you ever see that sort of thing in the arcade that's spinning around, it's lit up, there's a bunch of coins in it, and you're like, I could push a coin into that pile and push coins off. That is the premise. Well, not really, right? Because it's actually about Bug's sumo wrestling as well. But literally the game starts with a very specific setup depending on player count where your Bug is on this cardboard contraption, and then you are taking a piece of cardboard and moving it around to somewhere, an entry point along the circle, anywhere you want, and then you are pushing a disc into this pile. And anything that falls off, you get for future turns, and that's the game. And if you knock off your opponent's piece, you win the game. There are special powers. Everyone gets a card that sort of allows them to use an ability that, you know, they can save up for a future turn, or they can get a special piece that's a different shape. There are a few different piece sizes, and so you may want to try to knock off a big piece so that you can have a big turn at the right moment. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out how you were supposed to push the piece onto the board, because if you flicked it, it would completely change the game. We ended up having to go onto their Kickstarter page to watch demo videos of how to push the piece, which is you go from the top down with your finger at the back and sort of push in. I think there are team games for 2v2. There are different setups. There's literal photographs have set up the board to look like this, and there is a bunch of special powers. I think from the Kickstarter, it came with a bunch of extra special powers. What do you guys want to talk about? Kabuto Sumo.
Well, I mean, I'm very excited to talk about this, as it was one of your most anticipated games of 2021.
Okay.
I also want to say one thing. Okay.
Okay.
Look, I just remember, I might be misremembering, but you can correct me if I'm
I'll
honestly
correct
wrong.
You.
Yeah.
Yes.
I will trust Nealon's opinion more than yours at this point.
Well,
I just have to bring this up again. Didn't you say that you think that the quarter pushing game in the arcade is one of the best games in the arcade? I remember, I think that was your most egregious statement of that specific podcast, which was podcast number 169.
Well, don't tell them. Don't tell. Okay. I think it's a fun idea. It's like an optical illusion to steal money from people, right? Like,
Right.
Because you look at it and you're like, there's no way money won't fall off. But then when you push a circle
Right.
into other circles, they just make space.
Yeah.
Not an optical. I don't know what kind of illusion it is, but
Right.
someone will surely correct.
Well, whatever kind of illusion it is, it's certainly not the most fun thing that you can do at an arcade.
That would be DDR.
That would be skee ball. I like skee ball.
Okay.
Anyhow, It's an incredibly pretty presentation. I like the look of the pieces. It's an overused term for a game like this, but the pieces are chunky. They're big pieces.
They're like wood, but coated in something beyond wood to make them sort of work
almost
well.
Like some sort of like lacquer. I don't know if that's actually what it is, but something like that. So it's a great presentation. I think the game is not so great. Found it a little bit on the underwhelming side for a dexterity game. I think with a dexterity game, you want exciting moments. You want action to happen. It sort of fell flat. There wasn't any like big moments in my plays of it.
Yeah, if I could call out what I felt were like, let's call it the intentional fun high points in this game, where it's like, you push a thing and you're like, okay, this is it. I can see it's all going to line up. This is going to be it. I'm going to get you. You push it in and nothing happens. Like, that deflation is funny when it happens, but it's also just like kind of annoying because it's like you can't really predict much of what's going to happen. It's like any of your best laid plans are kind of just subject to the arbitrary physics of the game board in a way. And then even when the opposite happens and you're like, okay, this is going to be the move that's going to give me a lot of stuff, it's not like the coin falling game where it's like buckets and buckets and stuff is falling out. Like, 2 things fall off the edge and you're like, oh, cool, I've got 2 more pieces. Like, the highs are not that high. And even the most climactic moment, I push someone off of the game board, is like, oh, okay, cool, I won, we're done. Like, it doesn't lead to big moments at all, like you said, Mark. Like, anything that should be good about it. And I do think the physicality of it, I think the look of it, I think that the thought that they have put into just the manufacturing of it, like, even the cardboard is thick and glossy in a way that, like, helps the smoothness of the game. It's a fantastic piece of physical work, but I don't think it's any fun to play.
I think that similar to how I felt a few weeks back about Oink games and sort of the straw that broke some back, I think that Kabuto Sumo has broken me for dexterity games. There's a certain level of buy-in that you have to have when you're playing a dexterity game where it's like, you know, we're getting out Lupin Louie, you know, and like we're going to have a good time and it's going to be fun. And Kabuto Sumo did not deliver that. For me, Neelan and I had a 2-player game that I think went on for like 45 minutes as I pushed one way and he pushed the other way, and like we just kept circling the middle for such an agonizing amount of time. I did really like the player power that Neelan had, which was allowing him to bank discs for a super turn. Mm-hmm. So he put one on, and then, you know, 30 minutes later he's like, super turn, you know, and like got to push like 12 in at once and still didn't kill me, which was great. Again, like on first blush, like Crash Octopus, immediately I would want to play that again over Kabuto Sumo. But even still, all of these dexterity games feel like 5 plays or less. Everybody knows the rules. We move on to a different game.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to be much more selective in the dexterity realm. And I'm actually trying to get rid of my Crokinole board right now, which Christina is not having. So I think, I don't know if it's Kabuto Sumo, I don't know if it's me, I don't know who's broken. You know, like I said, I've pushed the eject button on Oink games to a certain degree and pushed the eject button. Today, I'm hitting that big button for dexterity games.
Our first game of it, the 3 of us, lasted 15 minutes. And then you guys told me about your 45-minute game of it. First of all, I couldn't imagine a game going that long. It just seemed like it would be unbearable. And because our game went so quickly, after we played, I decided to look at other people's experiences. People have like reported back on playing it. And there's like people have said that like their games go on for like an hour or so. And I cannot imagine playing this game, one single game of Kabuto Sumo for an hour. It just strikes me as so bad and boring to do that for so long.
I think, Neelan, I do want to end with your thought re-amplified that this is very lovingly crafted. Like, there's a lot of craftsmanship and thought to the art, to the presentation, to the production. And, you know, you're going to be excited to open this box for sure. Like, there's a lot going on there, but it just doesn't work for me. And again, I'm not even sure that dexterity, I'm having sort of this, like, what dexterity games make the cut, and everyone has that one, and I'm like, is there a context where I'd rather play a dexterity game than just a straight party game? And I think the answer is no. But that's because I am Kellen, king of the party games. That's all I like and all I play. Sorry, John Perkis, I am coming for you, actual lol, lol. And that was Kabuto Sumo. All right, Mark, why don't you tell us about Whirling Witchcraft?
Another game that we played in our little get-together was Whirling Witchcraft. We got a review copy of this from AEG. The way that Whirling Witchcraft works is you are opposing witches, and you've got a workbench in front of you where you hold your supplies, your ingredients for the recipes that you're creating, the potions, I guess, or whatever that you're creating. You also have a cauldron in front of you, this little 3D, nice, cute little cauldron that is going to be passed around to your opponents in the game. On your turn, you're going to select one of the 4 cards that you begin the game with. They're each going to have sort of like a recipe conversion aspect to them. And so, for example, one card that you might have might say, like, convert 2 green cubes to a green, red, and 2 blue cubes. So if you play that card from your own personal workbench, you have to take the input, so in this case, the 2 green cubes, and then whatever is output from the recipe, you're going to place onto the cauldron. So in this case, I take 2 green cubes from my workbench to activate the card, and then from the shared supply, I take whatever is created. So in this case, a green cube, a red cube, and 2 blue cubes. Everybody's doing this simultaneously, and then once everybody's done, you pass the cauldron to your opponent, and they add the new ingredients to their own workbench. What you're trying to do is you're trying to flood your opponent in any specific type of ingredient. So if I pass Neelan these ingredients and he's already filled on blue cubes, these 2 new blue cubes that I'm sending to him are now points to me. So I'm trying to, again, flood his workbench in specific ingredients. After you do that for the first round, everybody will draw another card, so we'll have 4 cards again. You pass the cards to the opponent on your right, so it's going the other direction. And with your new cards, you're going to select another recipe. You're going to play it. Now you can activate both recipes, the one that you drew in the earlier round and the one that you just played. And you're doing the same thing, again, just converting cubes from your workbench. Whatever is output from that a recipe is drawn from the shared supply, and then you pass that to your opponent, trying to overspill in any particular color. First player to score 5 points in this method wins the game. There's also a couple other wrinkles to the game where you can start out with a player power. There are variable player powers that affect your ability to break rules or have like recipes from the start of the game. There's also an aspect where playing certain types of cards will move you up one of 3 tracks, and when you hit certain points on these tracks, you get a bonus. But that's basically it. For all the production, the game plays quite quickly. I think our game was in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 minutes. What did you guys think of Whirling Witchcraft?
Yeah, I think the only other thing, Mark, is the fact that the different resources have different amounts that you can store on your player board. So to score points in black, it's much not easier because black is a harder resource to come by, but there are only 3 spots for black on your board. And so, every black cube above 3 that you send someone, boom, you're scoring points versus the reds and the greens, which you can store quite a bit more on your workbench. So there's a little bit of variability in even the resource types themselves. Whirling Witchcraft is very challenging for me to comment on. I think that the premise of it is so cool, which is this engine of inputs and outputs that mine affects yours, which affects yours. And so, oh my God, Mark to my left, he's going to be outputting a bunch of green, and then Neelan is going to have to deal with that. So what do I need to do with my engine to play along with this sort of take that light cube conversion game, right? Which even feels a little like Century Spice Road, except that, all of the outputs are being sent left and right, similar to like a bullet even.
I thought it was interesting because I hadn't made the Bullet Hard connection until you mentioned it on the day, but I think that is actually a pretty apt comparison. I think Bullet Hard is a better game, but that idea where you're trying to produce content to overflow the attention span of the person on your left while utilizing everything that you can from the person you're right. It did remind me when I first heard about it, and I'm sorry for mentioning Eternal again, Kellen, but when you play Eternal not as a 2-player game, it has that same thing. You're blocking the person on your right, attacking the person on your left. And you can think of it like that. It's like an attack and a defense thing. Are you utilizing enough of the cubes that the person on your right is giving you? And that can change. It's not a very long game, but if I am aptly using up all the green cubes Kellen's giving me, then Kellen might shift to giving me white cubes because I haven't built up the defense to utilize white cubes. Meanwhile, I have to be keeping an eye on what Mark is utilizing so that I can get the points on top of him. There is a slightly more subtle, devious flow to this that I thought was surprising for what is effectively a 10 to 15 minute light filler game. I can't disagree with what Mark said that it is overproduced, but I've actually had a lot of fun with this. This is a game that almost every time I've played it, I've wanted to play 2 or 3 games of it in quick succession because it just goes so fast and it just feels good when you just get that edge up and you're like, okay, you were 3 points up, but I've just had a killer turn and you've now spammed 5 more cubes than you can use. Like, it has spiky moments like that I dig.
The way that I tried to describe this to them when we played it, and I think I played it 3 times, was that it feels like there's the promise, there's the underneath promise of what the game is that feels so good. But by the 4th turn of every game, which again, you've gotten to in about 3 minutes, the game has broken. And not broken in like the it's unbalanced, but like the game is going to last between 4 and 10 turns, almost assuredly. And by the 4th turn, someone is losing and it's tilted towards, can you get out of this? I can't imagine some higher level play where, you know, it's gone 20 turns and everyone's converting the perfect amount. So it's almost like the promise of, I'm going to build an engine that corresponds with the symbiosis of what's happening at this table, and it's going to be this like frantic affair. It's like, no, by like the 3rd card that someone has played, it's like almost over or barreling towards being over.
Yeah.
And that feels like a lie to me. I don't know how else to say it. Like, I felt like, I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. And then it starts and I'm like, my first card, oh, this is great. My second card, this is great. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. No, like there's no card here that works for me. And the game is basically over. And I think maybe the production is a bigger part of this, right? Because production and price tag, the 2 Ps, there are people, process, product. No, those are the 3 Ps for a different program. But on our program, the 2 Ps, price and production, this costs $40.
Yeah.
End of review. Don't buy it.
For as much as I've enjoyed this, as much as I've praised this as a really surprising filler game, I will concede that I can't get past the idea that the price point is too high for it. I think you could be swayed by the way the game looks potentially, but it's definitely mechanically a hard game to justify at that price. But I think it's more fun than its appearance might lead you to believe. Like, I had very middling expectations going in and was pleasantly surprised.
Yes. No, sorry for cutting off. I just checked. It's $32 on Miniature Market US, if that matters. But even at $32, it's too expensive. And don't think that that means that the production is fun, that there are dual-layered player boards, that there's player aids for everything. There are production problems. Yeah. It's kind of an annoying, in some ways, game to play physically. There are huge cauldrons that it's just like, why does this exist? Why didn't we spend more time working on, you know, the flow and the UI of what's happening here? I do, again, at the very core of this, I'm like, there is something here. And I think that's what Neelan is feeling.
Yeah.
You know, I always tell Neelan what he's feeling. But like, this isn't some deluxe edition, and that's why it's costing you $30 when it should be $12. It has pretty art. I like the color palette.
I will say that
gradients. Do you like gradients? Because there are gradients in this game.
I'll say that I enjoyed my play of this, but with the sort of understanding and the realization that it's sort of like a trifle.
Yeah.
It's like Kellen said, it's like a game that's going to be over in 4 to 10 rounds, although 10 rounds seems
like
crazy long to me.
I don't think I've had a game of this that lasted longer than 7 turns.
Yeah, and 7.
I was trying to stat the feedback where someone would email me and say, actually, like I've played a solo game that went 17 turns, Kellen.
Right. So for me, like I said, it's a trifle. It's a fun trifle, but it is just a trifle. So I don't think you can get too wrapped up in like, oh, I got beat because of bad card draw. Because you're probably, I mean, it might happen. It very well might happen. It's likely to happen. But I would say also to sort of agree with Kellen, like as nice of a trifle as I think it is, I think it should be priced appropriately. Like if this game was $10, $15, I could definitely recommend it because it's like a game you can play while drinking coffee real quick. You just have a real quick game of this and you're done. But for, you know, where it's at now, which I guess is, you know, 30 plus, it seems like it's not holding its weight, basically.
It's also hard because I do love interactive family weight stuff. And, you know, both this and Brew as like more recent family weight, I feel like I haven't been able to get behind them in a way that I even want to, you know, because I do like how connected everything is in what you're doing. So I think that part's cool.
So that was Whirling Witchcraft by Eric Anderson Sunden and AEG.
Just a reminder that you still have 1 week to vote in the draft to win that $50 gift card. You need to listen to last week's episode 192 and vote at boardgamebarrage.com/draft.
And a bit of exciting news. This weekend, Saturday, October 2nd at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, we'll be joining So Very Wrong About Games as part of their fundraiser to raise money for Food Banks Canada. We'll be joining the guys at So Very Wrong About Games as well as No Pun Included. So we'll be playing some games there. More information at the So Very Wrong About Games Twitter. Excited to do that. And would love to have some BGB fans show up as well.
One more quick thing I want to bring up is that we are moments away, maybe a couple of weeks out from kicking off the Board Game Barrage Ghost Turkey event. This is our take on Secret Santa, and the way that you can participate in that if you want to give and receive board games to people around the world, depending on how willing you are to handle international shipping. Really is like an international event catered to your convenience. And you can come and join us at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. There is a Ghost Turkey channel. Hang around in there if you want to get some hype brewing for the next couple of weeks when we'll start to roll out the registration for this officially. We would love to have you take part. It's just getting bigger and bigger every year, and it's one of my highlights of the year for sure.
Didn't I see you demand in there, Nealon, in the Ghost Turkey channel that people submit a new piece of art for the Ghost Turkey?
That's a good point, Mark. Yeah, we need a new official mascot in art form. And I guess this is as good a time as any to put a call out. If you are a budding artist and have any willingness at all to see your art be an official part of BGB Ghost Turkey canon.
Immortalized, I would say.
Exactly. Yeah. Immortalized for all time as the official Ghost Turkey mascot. Take those two words and do with them what you will. If this sounds like something you'd want to help us out with, we would super appreciate it. Please reach out either at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com or to me in the Discord, and we will happily reward you for your time.
I think I saw some sketches that Tom from Shut Up and Sit Down posted on Twitter. So, Tom, if you want to draw the official Ghost Turkey, please go ahead and email that in at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. And now, on to today's featured topic, which can only be described in multiple scenarios and sentences. This is where maybe one of you guys gives me the sentence to say.
Sure.
No, we want to talk about the reality of board game ownership. And we're going to start with an anecdote, as we always do. I sent Mark an unprompted invitation to a Google Sheet. Mark, what was the name of that Google Sheet?
I believe it was Mark's Biggest Score, which instantly got me excited, obviously.
Right. An invitation to view, not to edit.
Yeah.
An invitation to view.
I have very limited control over this sheet. I should clarify that.
And for those who don't know, Mark is a premier board game trader. You know, you've seen you trade up from a paperclip to a card. That's Mark. That was Mark as an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Where you're like, it's like, Mark, why are you buying a third copy of Kabuto Sumo? And he's like,
Kellen, you idiot. Do you know what this is worth?
Yeah, I bought it here for $6 and now it's going for $15. So he is acquiring and selling. He should own a business doing that. And so Mark and I have what I would call a symbiotic relationship. I was thinking about this in the shower, and I'm like the fish. I haven't played enough Oceans, but the sort of guppy that feeds along the other bigger fish, sort of eating in the wake of.
You're calling me the one that sticks to the skin of the bigger one and sucks the nutrients?
Am I the whale?
Like the ones that just attached to whales. Yeah.
I think so.
Anyway, that oceanography. Mark, what did you find when you got to the list of Mark's biggest score?
I found a list of a lot of games that I was interested in playing, so that's always a bonus when it comes to finding games to trade or to buy with the idea of trading. I always like games, obviously, that I think I'm going to enjoy that I'd like to try out. But I did see a lot of value. I think that they were value priced, so that was fun. We've done this before. I don't know if you were going to get to that later, but Kellen has invited me to another view-only, no editing powers list of games that he was looking to unload, and that went really well for me. I always like trade fodder. I always like having games up for trade. The wheeling and dealing and trading of games is one of the aspects of the hobby that I enjoy.
76 board games. were on the list of the secret score. And I'm not going to reveal to the audience those prices, maybe as a Patreon exclusive. Maybe.
Sure.
Who could say? I hit a breaking point, and that is really the impetus for this episode, where I just like, my apartment is a one-bedroom apartment in Los Angeles, which means not that many square feet, you know, SQFT. What do they say in Europe, Neelan?
So that'll be square meters.
Are you me right
No,
now?
100%. It's actually kind of funny because, you know, they're a lot more square feet to a square meter, so apartments seem a lot smaller in South Africa.
There are a lot more square what to square what?
Let's move on. This is crazy talk.
Square, there's more.
There's more square feet to a square meter. It's about like 9 square feet is 1 square meter.
So your apartment is like 10?
Yeah, exactly. 10 square meters.
My apartment is 10 lengths big. That's how they do it in South Africa. Okay, so I have a board game closet. It was overflowing. I was like, should I donate these to DI? Do I try to sell them individually? One of the things that's so interesting is that the price of these games, I know there is value. Like, this is not like, first of all, I don't get trash, right? I don't buy board game trash.
You would never let that into your house, into your home.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
cross my domicile, first of all. And then second of all, it's like, how do I sell it? Who do I get it to? Because it's like, if I'm going to ship this Ankh pledge, it's going to cost me $100 to ship it to someone. And so connecting that price to that I end up not doing anything. I end up just leaving it, and then my house overflows and my mental health deteriorates. And so I hit a breaking point. I said, I'm selling all these to Mark. I need to make it valuable to Mark. So I priced it. My thought was, if Mark can't make $1,000 or some close to $1,000 on this trade, it will not be worth it. Mark's just like, yeah, man, I'll be there. And he showed up like 2 days later, and we just put them all in his car, and he Venmo'd me.
Yeah,
Done.
easy.
I can't understand, and I want to understand, Mark. Like, how I was like ready to, and I didn't tell you this, I was ready to just push him off the ledge because I'm on the second floor. I was ready to just get rid of him.
You told me this like post me Venmoing you the money, which I found troubling. That you were saying,
Mark.
oh yeah,
You could have just waited below his window.
that's
Got
true.
it for free.
Like a fireman, like
Yeah.
one of those things
The
that
little,
catches
like,
people
little
when
net,
they
yeah.
jump off a building.
But it's like, Mark, you admitted, okay, and this is why you're the exception. First of all, you're the exception. That some of the games from the last time you trailed in my wake, the games from the last time we did this over a year ago,
Correct.
are still in the box that you put them in from my house.
That's correct. That is true. Some of them have not seen the light of day. That is 100% accurate. That said, a lot of them have seen the light of day. A, because I played them, and B, because I have traded them or sold them. So, yes, I mean, I will say that when I walked into your place and I saw the pile not as a list of 75 things on a spreadsheet, but as 75 boxes of varying sizes, including quite big sizes, I was a little like, oh, I really have committed to something big here. So there was that. I mean, you will recall that I brought a large moving box to put them in, and it was not nearly big enough to take all the games. So yeah, there is, and obviously this is like a situation where, you know, we're speaking from a place of privilege, being able to have all these games, and that's nice. But even with that, you know, again, I just enjoy the trading so much. It's less the selling. I mean, I do sell some of the games, but the trading is for me so fun, and it's a way to get games without having to, you know, we talked about Whirling Witchcraft, Kabuto Sumo, and the prices of those games. If I was more interested in Whirling Witchcraft, and, you know, it's not a game that I cannot see myself ever trading for, but I would trade a $15, $10 game for Whirling Witchcraft, you know, 6 months from now to show to friends. So, you know, it's a way to get games on the cheap, to like interact with people. I love the back and forth of making deals. And I've talked about this before, but you know, you get an offer from somebody, you counter offer, and then you're like, you know what? We're shipping these games. Let's make it a bigger trade. Let's make the shipping worth it. And there's like this conversation that goes back and forth. There are people now that on BGG that I would never have interacted with ever, that now I interact with on a, you know, regular basis, semi-regular basis. When it comes to proposing deals, there's a gentleman in the Northeast that he was looking to unload his old war games. And so I've been talking to him and making deals with him, and we've been talking about war games, and he's been playing them for 50 years. And the only reason that we are like having this like, weekly discussion is because we started doing these trades. So
I have a question for you though, Mark.
yes,
because this is the thing I'm curious about.
yeah.
As regards to this topic is like someone comes to you with like a all in for like, let's call it like Zombicide, like 5 giant boxes stacked on top of each other. And like, I'll give you all of them for, I don't know, $20. Where is the consideration in your head that is like, where am I going to put this? Like where is the balance of like, I actually have to occupy some portion of my living space with this stack of boxes.
Right. And, when we were discussing the podcast topic, I was sort of like eager to discuss this for a number of reasons, but one that I'll reveal at the end of the show. So there's a little bit of a cliffhanger there for you. But honestly, the size is not really an issue. And, I'm also in LA. I'm not in a sprawling place with a ton of storage, but I don't know. I don't mind having a bunch of game boxes. I know for you guys, there is like a psychic burden to it that it actually does like bum you out.
Psychic?
Psychic, like mental. I was trying to be like a fancier word for mental. There's a psychic burden. For me, there is some of that. Like, obviously, it's not great to have like boxes, but it's way more than counterbalanced by the fun I see either by playing the game or by trading it or by, selling it or something. That's, again, an aspect that I find so exciting and fun that I'm generally more than willing to deal with the lack of room or like the sloppiness for a little bit while I move the games on. Obviously, there is a limit, and I feel like I'm right around the limit, I think, but I've also have thought I was at the limit in the past and have since moved that limit to new higher limits. So
if you were at the limit and a good deal came, like is it really a limit though? Is kind of my question. Would you make it work? Would you be like, no,
I would make it work. Yeah, if I got, if I was,
there's no limit, is there?
That's true. I guess you've cracked me. You've broken my mental thing here. No, that's true. I mean, if I was at capacity, if it was like
board games coming out of every table, every floor space surface.
But I got like some crazy deal. I just couldn't resist. I mean, and that's probably some sort of like moral or personality failure or something. but I'm addicted to the thrill of the hunt and the trade.
And the thing that's interesting, Mark, is that like it's so like, and you said this already, but it's so counter to like something that's been like on the forefront of my mind recently, because until literally yesterday, I had board games. I'm thankful that I have space for a dedicated game room, but like I had board games strewn across all corners, all edges of that room, like piled 3 games high along one wall, jammed into the corners because I just was waiting on shelf space that I didn't have. And, other than just like the psychic burden, as it were, it is literally just kind of like I want to be able to navigate this space without feeling like I'm stepping over board game boxes, right? And then that becomes a whole different conversation, a whole different consideration, like once I actually got my board game shelves installed. So I got these 2 4x4 calyxes put into that one of the walls of that room yesterday. And now the conversation I'm having with myself is, okay, how do I want to organize all of this space? Like, where do big games go? Where do small games go? And like, it's something that you don't think about that much until you're in the process of literally moving boxes around and picking them up and moving them out of the room and putting them on top of shelves, which is like, oh, there is like a physical component to all of this. Like there is a space occupancy problem with all of this where it's like, okay, now that I have this giant wall of shelves, is that even enough shelf space? Am I still going to have some things on the floor or in corners of the room? Do I have to put up other shelves? And the physical process of like pulling up my Gloomhaven box and sliding it around different parts of the shelf to find the place it works, it's a lot. And it's kind of just like wearing on me in this weird way. We're like trying to figure out the physical existence of like all of these objects in a ultimately limited amount of space. It's doing my head in. And this is the first time I've ever had to like seriously consider it because I've had the space to like actually do it properly.
I get that, and I think I'm going to be reorganizing stuff soon, so there is that to consider. Like, I've thought of having some sort of, like, system where the heavy games are here, or maybe alphabetize them by author or whatever, but I think in the end I'm not going to really do that, because while I think that is cool, I don't want to worry about the upkeep of, like, okay, well, I've played this game, it's got to go now, the Kinezias go here, so I have to worry about putting it there. Again, I can see that being a really fun, interesting way to like, organize your games. I've seen pictures on Reddit or on board game Twitter of people like organizing their games by color, and I always thought that like sort of looked like a fun way to do it. That said, obviously that spatial occupancy is something that to consider and something that can be annoying or even worse, or but again, for me it's balanced not only by what I talked about, like the trading part of it, but and call it naivete because it might be, but I always see these games as like boxes of fun. And so like, yeah, this space is occupied by a box and it's sort of like in the way potentially, but it's a box of like when friends come over or when I go to a friend's place, this is going to be a box of fun. Mm-hmm. This has a good experience in it. This might have like a memory in it. And so like, I might never have played it. I might not know much about it. I might not even know like, okay, people are saying it's a good game or not. Like I might not even have like that calibration, but it just feels like potential fun right there in this colorful box. And like, what am I going to occupy that space with that's going to be better than that? Of course there are. Of course, you should have a bunch of different things in your place. And,
hopefully.
Yeah, you don't want purely board games, but it's hard for me to again, not see the games as like, these like fun boxes.
Right. More than just the physical. And actually something that you said yesterday that actually I think touches on this point nicely was like kind of you were talking about like a half completed Pandemic Legacy game box you have.
Yes.
And like how you've held onto it for so long despite the fact that it's been ages since you played it and you have no intention of getting rid of it because it is more than just a game box to you. That like touches on like mementos and nostalgia stuff more than this. But like there's something to that which I kind of, not to say that I'm coming around to what you're saying, but like it sounds like what you're saying is that like it's much less of a burden on the physical when you have the emotional attachment to it.
Right. And the potential. I see a lot of potential when I see like a board game shelf. It just seems like, okay, like, I see a board game shelf that has like 30 games on it. Mm-hmm. And just for me, one of the first things I think about is like, that is 30 different nights of having fun. Like that's 30 different like fun experiences. That's 30 times sitting around with friends on that shelf. There's like a potential, even though if I was more practical, I would see like, okay, but this is cost that, and this is just taking up space. And like, now it's a burden of like, now I feel like I've got to play it. Mm-hmm. I get that. And I think a better way to think about things is balancing the two. But for me, I just can't help but see the potential.
What about shared resources? What about like if you could have one box that had all the chits and the dice and the player pieces, and then we could reduce the space for everything else by like 90%.
Is this the we're going to a desert island, I'm taking 100 blank cards situation?
No. It's a little, and again, not the focus of what we're talking about, these sort of moral, I look at a game like Whirling Witchcraft that could have been 1/8 the size of it, and then I start looking at all the boxes and how many of them just have dice in them.
Yeah.
Or how many of them just have the same component in them. And I love the idea of the self-contained box, but then I've started to, it's like within the calyx, how do I store smaller games?
Yeah.
And so there's a couple of different ways that I've done that. I have this sort of H shelf that someone recommended on Discord to put into a calyx to put smaller games in. I also have a photo case where you just get rid of the boxes and store them even smaller. And it's sort of like, I don't know, man. I know we've gone here before, but I think, even talking with some of your friends, like we were all the crazy ones.
Right.
It was like, wait a minute. There were multiple double takes about like how many board games we all own.
Yeah.
On that note, do you guys do like let's say you have a game and an expansion, you can get them into one box. Are you doing that as often as you can, like getting as much as you can into one box?
I threw out the Inish expansion box yesterday after Mark took all the games. He took them all. I was like, oh, thank. And I was going through and I had just left the box on the shelf, even though I had integrated all of the stuff. And same with the Bunny Kingdom expansion. I just got rid of the box. So yes, I am full bore into that. I'm very careful though about labeling all of the expansion stuff in the new box, because the worst thing is like excited to play a game and you open it up and you can't discern what is what. I really, really don't like that.
It might actually surprise you to hear that I have sort of embraced this more. I have come a long way from keeping inserts underneath the bed. And, like I have done the throwing away like my Scythe collector's edition box to like rebox it all into a more convenient way. Stuff like that. Like I've long gone past the idea that it's worth preserving all parts of it. That said, though, the reason I brought this up is because I was reminded of like this idea, which is like some people do, for example, with Splendor, where you cut the box down to like a third of its size, right? And even if I was like that crafty and that physically inclined, something about that rubs me the wrong way. Like, I have this still idea in my head that I want to preserve some semblance of like the original creation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the box is part of the game.
Exactly, it's part of the game. It's part of the creator's intent. I know that that's weird in the space of like commercial stuff. I know.
No.
But like publishers just want the box to be bigger, etc., etc., etc. But that said, there's something about like the entirety of the product that is like in a dumb way, and it is a nostalgic way. I was the person that kept like PC game boxes, even though the game was just a jewel case inside of that like giant cardboard box. You know, like there is something about preserving the experience of taking the box off the shelf and opening the flap and like, oh, look at all these screenshots, like reminding me of what it felt like to get it for the first time. And I'm kind of a sucker for that a little bit.
I think the sort of third rail of this is the pandemic, and, you know, not to be sad, but that like people's ability to play games went down, but a lot of the games were still coming out. And so I imagine that people find themselves in a similar vibe where as things hopefully get better rapidly in the next month or so, you're sort of looking around, you know, the flat, I think I'm
how many square meters is your flat?
Looking around the flat and going, you know, I've been here for 2 years and now like I've got all this stuff here because I've been hunkered down and now I'm not. And so it's this like push and pull. Yeah, I think that for me, I would love to hear from listeners any organizational tactics or new ways that they're shelving, categorizing, organizing to make it just a little bit more approachable. And it may be just the mood that I am personally in. I actually recently like got some new like spice racks and like some kitchen Tupperware to kind of like better organize the things that I have while also trying to get rid of things that I have. And I think a big part of that is just having, again, lived in this apartment for 2 years with 2 people and a dog and, you know, having too many board games. Honestly,
Yeah.
We have a giant walk-in closet that has nothing that a normal closet has in it.
Right.
It has podcast microphones, lights, and board games.
Yeah.
And it is stuffed.
Yeah, I totally get that. There's a lot to be said for like the ridiculousness sort of like me having all these shelves and just complete shock full of games and then acquiring more. I totally get that. And there is the danger of being too beholden to your objects. Like, you know, the cliche of like, do you own your stuff or does stuff own you? I think there is truth in that. And I feel like the transient nature of my relationships with my games sort of dulls that. Like, as I've said, like I have all these games, but I don't, except for the ones like where Neelan mentioned about where I have like some real emotional connection to it. 95% of my games, at least, I'm happy to trade or get rid of or to sell. So if I lost half my games, if I sold half my games, whatever, the emotion is not tied to the box itself. It's more tied to the potential of the box, I would say.
I read this book called Goodbye Things, the New Japanese Minimalism, and it sort of talked about how calm people feel when they go into hotels and how just staying at a hotel, like you have one bag of things, and that in part the hotel is the reason that people like hotels is because it's this big open space and you've got one little group of things and everything else is just like blank.
Yeah.
And I was like, like I hadn't thought that that might be why people enjoy hotels or that I enjoy hotels.
Yeah.
Not that I, you know, stay in many, but it made me wonder if I couldn't somehow make my own flat more like a hotel. So let us know how you are currently feeling about your board game collection, the space that it takes up, or just general thoughts on gaming here as we near the end of 2021. You can chat with us in Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. Join thousands of other board gamers. You can chat with us on Facebook in our Facebook group, Board Game Barrage. And you can email us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com if you don't want to deal with the other people and you just want to deal with us. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the show. You can follow us on Twitter at BRDGameBarrage. You can find us on Instagram at BoardGameBarrage. We appreciate everyone who sends in comments and discusses the episodes with us. It really makes the whole thing worth it. As always, thank you to Heart Society Music for their fantastic song, What's on Your Mind, Kid, from their album Wake the Queens. So long, and have a great week.
Bye-bye.
But now, my big reveal. I'm moving to Vegas.
What? You can't clap before the 6-7, 6-5.
I was
You're getting
it was a preparatory clap.
You can't prep clap. If you clap on your thing, that would ruin it. All right. 3 and a 2, 1.
That's not the way to do the 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, a 3 and a 2.
There's okay. It is early, Mark.
That's fair.
First of all,
I know. I get that.
like the only thing is I can hear in my voice is a little deeper.
Yeah, it's good.
And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe this, maybe
the
I
way.
can
The
have
best time of day for your voice.
a new era of reliability or
I love this, that we just start recording in the morning because it's when our voice sounds best.
Mark, I have a bone to pick with you.
Okay, let's do it.
We met some of your friends last night, which is maybe the first time you've let us meet them.
Right. I was very conscious
And-
about that. Very
Oh, sorry.
concerned.
Sorry, I'll be one. Give me
Yeah,
1
you
second.
got it.
Sorry.
Is this a joke worth having Nealon come back for?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, probably.
I've already made the joke last night, but it's fine.
Okay. Well, what did you just do? What the hell was that?
Wait, what?
What the hell? What did you just do?
Almost died.
Huh?
I almost died is what I just did.
Yeah. What happened?
Why?
I was just opening the vent.
Oh, okay.
It's very hot in here.
So you didn't. I thought like you couldn't exist with that chair next to you, and you had to get it out of the room, and you threw it. Okay, Mark.
Yeah.
So we're meeting your friends, right? And like we're not your friends, right?
Yep.
Because again, we've never been to your home, but
Yep.
and so we're meeting them, and like this happens, I would say at least 3 times, right? Where you introduce both, the podcast,
Yeah.
and immediately they want to know who Nealon is.
Right.
It happened like 3 times. Like, oh, Nealon, they want to talk to Nealon.
Yeah.
What the hell? You're telling all your friends about Nealon, but not me?
I haven't said anything to anybody. I think it's just his like animal charisma. There's just like a draw, a primal draw.
Magnetism is just exactly.
Yeah.
It's hard. I have to fend off people all the time.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you guys had to see that. It's
I'm just glad you could find a stick handy to actually,
yeah.
beat them off when
ward
necessary.
them off.
Yeah.
Build a barrier around me.
Yeah. The bloodshed made for a little bit of a downer night, but you had to do what you had to do.
It had to be done.
What episode are we on?
That idea where you're trying to produce content. You're trying to produce stuff. You're trying to produce
Make a
stuff.
podcast.
Yeah, exactly.